The engine roars on the climb. Up ahead, a line of trucks slows down before another rain, while the mountain range closes off the horizon with cliffs, embankments, and lanes squeezed by the terrain. It's in this setting that Minas Gerais appears at the center of a road package estimated at more than RR billion res, bringing together federal and state concessions. But this figure doesn't represent a single project or money invested all at once. It brings together physical investments, operating costs, and decades-long contracts. It also mixes corridors managed by concessionaires with projects still dependent on permits or far from major interventions. How much of that has already reached the roads? Which highways will be expanded with additional lanes? And why build new lanes in Minas? Minas requires more than just laying asphalt next to the existing road. Stay with us for the next few minutes and find out where the billions of reais come from, which projects have started, what appears on paper, and how can the package transform the highways in Minas. Minas holds a hard-to-bypass posity on the Brazilian roadmap. The state connects to the southeast, the Midwest, and the Northeast. Along these roads, ore, steel, grains, food, fuel, industrial products, and millions of passengers travel between capitals, metropolitan regions, and inland cities. In this system, some highways function as national arteries. The BR-040 connects Brasilia to Belo Horizonte and Rio de Janeiro. The BR-381 connects the capital of Minas Gerais to the Steel Valley and to Governador Valadares. The BR-262 crosses the Triângulo Mineiro and reaches the metropolitan region of Belo Horizonte. Meanwhile, the BR-116, 251, and 153 connect Minas to Bahia, Goiás, and São Paulo. The weight of the trucks helps explain the pressure on the infrastructure. On the Rota dos Cristais, between Cristalina and Belo Horizonte, the official projection estimates about 70,000 vehicles per day, of which 68% are trucks. The strategic location brings traffic, but it also comes at a price. Worn-out pavements, bottlenecks, accidents, and contracts that don't always deliver what they promised. So the question that remains is, how did the road network, so important to the country, get to this point? The current package didn't come out of nowhere. For decades, Minas increased its dependence on highways, while mineral, agricultural, and industrial production grew. More heavy vehicles started sharing space with cars on two-lane roads, sharp curves, and urban crossings. In many corridors, the capacity of the roads did not keep up with the demand. In the 2010s, new concessions promised to restore roads, expand sections, and speed up pavement work. However, part of these contracts faced financial difficulties, delays, and economic and financial assumptions that needed to be reviewed. On BR-040, Via 040 took over the corridor between Brasilia and Juiz de Fora in 2014. 5 years later, it requested the negotiated return of the concession, claiming it was unable to fulfill the obligations it had assumed. The stretch ended up being divided into new models. Something similar happened with Concebra. The company managed more than 1,000 kilometers of the BR-060, BR-153, and BR-262 highways. In 2020, it joined the rebidding process. Separate projects were born from this contract, such as Rota do Zebu and Rota Sertanejo. Thus, part of the billions announced now tries to resolve issues left by a previous generation of concessions. The new contracts were restructured. They were divided into smaller lots and built around new economic and financial assumptions. However, drafting the contract does not immediately transform the road. Between the auction and the widened highway, there are signing, transition, detailed engineering designs, licensing, expropriation, and team mobilization. But which projects have already reached the roads? And which ones are still on the path between the contract and the construction site? The highway package in Minas Gerais doesn't move forward as a single project. Each corridor is at a different stage. On BR 381, between Belo Horizonte and Governador Valadares, the new contract was formalized in January 2025. The concessionaire took on the obligation to restore, operate, and expand 303 kilometers. On Rota dos Cristais and Rota do Zebu, the contracts were also signed in 2025. As for the Juiz de Fora de Rio section, the contract was formalized in September of the same year. The expansions depend on detailed engineering designs, permits, expropriations, and mobilization. The Rota Sertania moved forward later. After the auction in November 2025, the grant was issued in February 2026. In the official update consulted, the operational takeover and the start of major works still needed to be confirmed. Rota Gerais, with 735 kilometers on BR 116 and 251, had its tender document approved at the end of 2025. However, the NTT's page shows an inconsistency in the auction date. Therefore, the 13.3 billion reais planned cannot be considered as works in progress. In fact, there is no consolidated report of how much of those billions of reais has already been physically executed. The documents show corridors under new management and initial services, while most of the major expansions remain in preparation. However, a signed contract does not mean simultaneous addition of a second roadway along the entire stretch. Turning these projects into new lanes means building without interrupting highways in operation. Lanes are narrowed, temporary detours are set up, and machines work behind barriers. Some stages take place at night. To reduce traffic jams and protect workers, materials need to arrive at the construction site without blocking the highway. Before they can get a second roadway, many existing roadways need to be rebuilt. When the wear is on the surface, a milling machine removes the old pavement and makes room for a new layer of asphalt. But the deformation has reached the base. Resurfacing doesn't solve it. It's necessary to remove the damaged layers, fix the support, rebuild the pavement, and restore the drainage. Water is one of the biggest enemies of the road. As it seeps through the cracks or accumulates under the pavement, it reduces the strength of the layers and speeds up the formation of potholes. Duplicating a mountain road doesn't just mean building a second roadway next to it. In some sections, it may be necessary to cut through rock, remove material, or stabilize the ground. In other areas, the new geometry may require embankments, bridges, and viaducts to smooth out curves and slopes. The goal is to allow heavy vehicles to maintain a more constant speed, reducing risky overtaking and traffic queues. It's worth noting that BR 381 faces several of these challenges. The program includes 134.27 kilometers of duplications, 83 kilometers of additional lanes, and 51 alignment corrections. Correcting the alignment can mean abandoning a curve, cutting through a mountain, or crossing a valley with a bridge or viaduct. These are what engineers call major structures. In the Sertaneja Loop, there are more than 42 kilometers of duplications, 31.8 kilometers of additional lanes, as well as bypasses, frontage roads, access points, bus stops, and wildlife crossings. The bypasses remove heavy traffic from urban areas. The frontage roads separate local traffic from long-distance travel. Wildlife crossings aim to reduce animal collisions and maintain the connection between natural areas. The section from Juiz de Fora to Rio adds another element. The contract includes interventions associated with 3 tunnels. It also envisions duplications, 78 kilometers of additional lanes, frontage roads, pedestrian overpasses, and 12 hazardous material containment structures. Building, expanding, relocating, and adapting a tunnel requires geological investigation, excavation, structural support, waterproofing, drainage, ventilation, lighting, and emergency systems. Everything has to tie into the existing road without creating a bottleneck. On paper, the package is a sum of kilometers and billions that need to work as a safe, continuous, and efficient road system. The 7 federal projects connected to Minas add up to about 3,053 kilometers of corridors. In sequence, that would be roughly 7 times the road distance between Belo Horizonte and Rio de Janeiro. But that doesn't mean 3,000 kilometers of new roads. The calculation includes existing roadways that will be operated, restored, and expanded only at certain points. In the projects where the National Land Transport Agency ANTT separates the physical investments, 6 of them add up to 33.7 billion reais in capex, or resources allocated to construction and capital goods. Divided by the concession length, the average investment varies from about 10 billion reais per kilometer. On the Rota do Zebu and the Sertanejo route, there are more than 22 million reais in the Belo Horizonte, Juiz de Fora, and Juiz de Fora to Rio sections. To put the figure into perspective, it's worth doing a quick exercise. When construction on São Paulo Metro's Line 6 Orange resumed in 2020, the project was announced with an investment of about 15 billion reais for 15.3 kilometers. Using this value just as an illustrative reference, the 33.7 billion of the road capex would correspond to approximately 34 kilometers of underground subway. This is equivalent to about 31% of the São Paulo subway network's 110.9 kilometers of the São Paulo subway network. With about 100 billion reais in total, the equivalence would rise to about 102 kilometers, or 92% of the network. But this calculation mixes subway construction with road operation and maintenance over 30 years. That's why the most appropriate comparison uses only the known federal capex. Subways and highways have different structures, costs, and functions. Even so, the comparison reveals the financial scale of the package. The promised return logically starts with safety. Highway widening separates opposing traffic. Additional lanes create space for slow vehicles. Realignments reduce sharp curves. Runaway truck ramps help trucks that have lost their brakes, while overpasses reduce the conflict between pedestrians and fast traffic. On BR 381, the package includes 51 realignments, 23 pedestrian overpasses and runaway truck ramps. The real effect, however, can only be measured after the projects are completed by comparing accidents, deaths, and injuries before and after the interventions. A predictable road system reduces the time lost in traffic backups, accidents, and closures. For companies, this means more regular deliveries. For drivers, fewer hours exposed to traffic and risk. The projects also release job estimates. BR 381 is expected to generate almost 80,000 direct, indirect, and income effect related jobs. Rota Gerais projects around 127,000. These numbers do not represent workers simultaneously on the construction sites, but rather the chain of activity mobilized by the contract. The benefits will come at a cost. The concessions introduce or reorganize tolls. Trucks pay according to the number of axles, and frequent users may receive discounts. That's why success will depend on schedules, oversight, and balance between completed works, services provided, and fees charged. After concessions were handed back and promises were delayed, that will be the benchmark for assessing the package. More than 100 billion puts Minas Gerais at the center of a broad reorganization of highway concessions. However, figures do not repair road surfaces, do not stabilize slopes, nor do they reduce accidents. The result, in fact, will depend on what comes out of the contracts and reaches the roads. In the end, the success of this package will not be measured by the billions announced. It will be measured by the kilometers delivered, by more predictable journeys, and by the lives preserved on the roads every day in every corridor of Minas Gerais. Thanks for watching until the end. What are your thoughts on this project? More than 100 billion reais. That's a lot, isn't it? I hope that the people of Minas Gerais really get to see this project completed and that it has a positive impact on society, both economically and in terms of usability for everyone in the region. Thank you for watching this video up to this point. Take care and see you in the next video.